The next film is actually one of my favorites. People think it's just another telling of Dracula, but I think this film is special and no one talks about it anymore. Karl Freund, the shooter of Dracula 1931, directed The Mummy the next year in 1932. Before I talk about this film, and I love it, tell us what you think about it.
Oh my goodness, The Mummy is a wonderful story. And also in this one you have a few more comedic moments at times as well. I think they went into really trying to hit every sense. From the chill factor to, the little laugh to the tender. Well, of course, we also saw this in Dracula and Frankenstein as well in certain areas. But this is just a lovely film. And Karloff is back again as another one of the now iconic figures. It's really worth a watch. If you haven't watched it, sit down and watch it.
I love talking about this movie because it paints so many different pictures. And it makes me even angrier. And I know I can't get away from it, but Stephen Sommers is one of the worst directors in the history of time. He directed The Mummy and The Mummy Returns, while kind of atmospheric and adventuring. If you look at the 1932 version, it is pure and utter garbage compared to what happened in the 30s.
It is.
It's romantic. It's dark. It's spooky. It's a little funny. The leading lady in The Mummy, she was caught up in the spiritualism and astrology, so she would have these dark, faraway looks, and Boris Karloff, being the gentleman that he was always concerned about her. But this film is tragic. Yeah. It's romantic. It's sweeping. And despite the recycling of actors, it still leaves a mark. I love this film so much. It's one of those I can't put a thumb on, but there's something in it, something that speaks to the soul.
There is. This movie draws you in from the first time that the mummy is seen, which I think is a great scene in the very beginning of the film, and then he just walks out, to the very last. I mean, it really holds your attention.
From the creature in 1931 to Imhotep, to Lawrence Talbot, these are very tortured people. The only really bad guy out of the whole mess is Count Dracula.
Yeah.
All the rest of them could be painted as just folks or beings trying to make their own way. The creature from the Black Lagoon is just it's just a creature.
Well, you get back to Dracula there, he has his moments as well.
This is why what we differ from Stoker. I go from Stoker's vision, and Stoker's vision is of a beast.
True.
An evil, diabolical beast. There are moments in the 1931 film, to die, to be really dead, it must be glorious, which falls into the boredom of immortality. I give this, however, going back to The Mummy, I give this film 2 thumbs up. I love it. And if you can consume it, get, like we said before, get the Universal Essential Monsters Collection on Blu-ray, where they got them in a pack. Don't buy anything else. If you want to grab these great films, and The Mummy it's very, very high on my list, grab that film.
Yeah, I approve. Wholeheartedly.
Now, if you thought I liked that film, another film that I liked even more was the next year after that, in 1933, once again directed by James Whale, The Invisible Man.
Oh, yes.
Talk about it.
Oh, The Invisible Man, Claude Rains. I mean, you can't go wrong with this one. His performance as the Invisible Man was just great. And the effects at the time, I mean, this really astounded the 1930s audience.
And it's funny.
It is. And at this one, we do have a Carradine quote. He was in this film. And what was his famous quote? "I've just seen the Invisible Man."
It's so funny.
Yeah.
This film is so funny. Even the deaths are painted with some dark, morbid sense of humor. Almost, James Whale is sort of pushing his way through, and I can get away with this, and Bride of Frankenstein, he did it a little more, too.
Yeah.
But I enjoy this so much. I even enjoy it more than The Mummy because it's funny. Because it doesn't take itself so seriously. And the films, minus Dracula, the films that didn't necessarily take themselves too seriously from the 30s and 40s, I enjoy more than others.
Yeah.
So what do you give it? Would you recommend this film?
I would definitely recommend this film. I know it's a horror film, but it's a delight. It's really
horror,
is.
It's science fiction, it's
Matter of fact,
romantic.
I would say that it even borders more on science fiction than horror. I mean, it has some scary moments for that time, but it's more of a science fiction tale. It's got the Van Helsing seal of approval.
It also has the Dracula Podcast seal of approval. And once again, you can find it in that wonderful pack. And this is where we give Universal their props. Mm-hmm. I've ripped them to shreds, deservedly, over their modern incarnations. Mm-hmm. But they've made such great movies. We haven't even left the early part of the 30s. No. And we've already got The Phantom of the Opera, Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, and The Invisible Man. That's 5 films, quality films.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about it. This is why we are so critical about Universal now, is they set a standard and then just completely destroyed it.
If you listen to my review on Van Helsing, and it's on the Casting Dread version of Verbus Diablo, if you listen to that, you'll find my disdain on Van Helsing, and I don't want to talk about that film because I'll go off on a tangent and people don't want to hear that again. Although you can get the gist of it.
It's almost like if we even mention that film, it's like the scene in Young Frankenstein where they say, Frau Blücher, and the horses, carry on.
It's a foul and dirty word. It's one of. It's so sad because Abraham Van Helsing is such an iconic and wonderful character, and they called the movie Van Helsing.
Well, he's not Abraham Van Helsing.
And I'm going into the tangent, which I didn't want to do.
It's my fault, and I'm very sorry.
The next year, in 1934, we have an odd film, directed by Edgar G. Ulmer. It's The Black Cat.
Oh, yes, the Edgar Allan Poe films. There were a few of them. It's an interesting take. I'm not big on these movies. I guess being a fan of the real works, it kind of did it in for me. I found them to be a hodgepodge in many different ways. Although Lugosi, Karloff, they're all back, and they do great jobs with their performances and things. I just wasn't much on them.
In an interesting twist, the protagonist is Bela Lugosi, and the antagonist is Boris Karloff. And they play up the satanic parts of this whole mess.
Which really aren't in the stories.
Correct.
When I first discovered these films, I was thinking, oh, well, Edgar Allan Poe. They take elements from different stories and they put them into this film, but there's nothing, it's nothing like the real story that was written by Poe. And it's even billed, I believe, as Edgar Allan Poe's Black Cat.
What I like about this film is I like the cinematography. I like the scope it plays. I like the tension.
Yeah.
I like the fact that they're in this house and the tension's there. Aside from the haunted house films where it's a slow, gradual build, you get tension immediately.
Right.
You know that Lugosi is a man on a mission. And the ending scene, what happens to Mr. Karloff, also pushing the censors quite a bit.
Absolutely.
I like this film, but I don't give it the Dracula Podcast seal of approval for one specific reason. I think it drags.
It does. And I like I said in my part there, it's misleading. It's very misleading. Don't come into watching this one thinking that you're going to see Edgar Allan Poe, even though they say that you are.
I don't give it the Dracula Podcast seal of approval, but I do think that folks should see it, although there are many other films that you see first.